This idea of direct perception is in conflict with the constructivist approach. The constructivist idea, which is kind of the default, what everybody assumes, is that we have to build things based on the raw stimuli that we see out there in the world. You have to recombine elements of it and sort of build a perception. And the direct perception sort of idea argues with that. So here's the constructivist definition. For obvious reasons, it describes people as adding to and distorting information in the proximal stimulus, in other words, what's out there in the world, to obtain a percept, a meaningful interpretation of what's coming in. People are not seen as passively taking it all in all the available information. Instead, they're seen as active selectors, integrators, constructors of information. Now, this direct perception negates that. According to this view, direct perception, the light hitting the retina contains highly organized information that requires little or no interpretation. In the world we live in, certain aspects of stimuli remain invariant despite changes over time or in our physical relation. You may already be familiar with the idea of invariance. For example, consider a melody played on a piano in the key of C. Imagine that same melody transposed to G, and although the individual notes in the melody have been changed, it's still recognized. So take your favorite song. The people my age liked Led Zeppelin, even though Led Zeppelin was really before our time. But they were big into Led Zeppelin and Stairway to Heaven and all those classic hits. If they were played in a different key or even with a different instrument, we'd recognize the cadence, I guess is what he's getting at. So if sufficient time lapses between renditions, many listeners might not even recognize the key change. So the elements have changed, but the relationships between the notes have remained constant, as you can imagine. So I've got another video that speaks of this. This light bulb example, and you could see a 2-minute video that I've made independently, is very powerful. Holy cow, Batman. It is amazing how the figure looks like a person, and you can alter it to make it look male or female stereotypically, or alter the weight or the mood of the walking person. And the suggestion is that there's some direct perception here. That our knowledge of human beings walking in relative terms, with arms swinging and knees moving towards you and shoulders moving subtly and even the head bobbing a little bit, is invariant. It's just the way humans are. Even though there's subtle variations, you could tell what's happening. And that's an idea of direct perception. I don't need much refraction there. I don't have to construct anything. It just hits me like a ton of bricks. Here's this idea of flow. And by the way, this is the same Gibson from the 50s. Pretty neat idea. So a depiction of optic flow. I want to see what they wrote about here. Oh, yeah. Gibson became convinced that patterns of motion provide a great deal of information to the perceiver. His work with selecting and training pilots in World War II led him to think about information available to pilots as they landed. He developed the idea of optic flow depicted in this figure as the visual array presented to a pilot approaching a runway for landing. The arrows represent perceived movement, and that is the apparent movement of the ground coming towards you. There's a texture to this motion. Nearer things appear to move faster than things further away, of course, and the direction in which the object seems to move depends on the angle of the plane's approach. So the pilot can use all of this stuff to navigate the plane to the runway. So basically, this idea is that those things are invariant, and you can get good at those things, and we don't need to rely on too much of a constructivist approach. I like that idea. You can Google this, a motion parallax, Parallax, that depicts our ingrained knowledge of a moving world pretty well. So there's one other topic from this section. An important idea in Gibson's theory is that the information available to an organism exists not merely in the environment, but in an animal and environment ecosystem. As animals move around, and we could be considered part of this group, they experience their environments. Different biological organisms have different perceptual experiences because different organisms have different environments, different relationships, etc. Organisms directly perceive not only shapes and whole objects, but also each object's affordances. And so affordances are opportunities for behavior. Because different animals have different abilities, affordances are relative to the behavioral abilities of those animals that perceive them. And more generally, this means that information in light is not just about the things that the light bounces off of. It also is information about the perceiver and the relations between the perceiver and the environment. For example, if you take a jungle cat, he or she is low to the ground. Maybe they're bigger than dogs, but their head is just 3 feet off the ground tops, right? So that's an interaction between themselves and the environment, and they're used to that, and there's some invariance there, the way their paws move and their head may bounce up subtly, but they've got a relation there. So the behavioral abilities of the animal sort of adapt to that environment, and that's this idea of an affordance. It's an opportunity for behavior. Kind of an interesting idea, but a suggestion that's sort of a subdivision of this idea of direct perception.